Tom is a quiet boy. He does not like video games. He does not like loud toys. He loves rocks. Tom picks up rocks on his way home. He puts them in his bag. He takes them home every day. His room is full of rocks. Big rocks, small rocks, red, black, and shiny rocks. Tom cleans each rock. He gives them names. "This one is Ruby," he says. "This one is Fireball." Tom's mom smiled. His dad laughed. They looked at the table. It was full of rocks. Some were red, some were black, some were round, some were sharp. Tom loved each one. His dad often asked why he kept so many, but Tom never said, "They are just rocks." To him, they were special. Each had a color, each had a shape. Some sparkled in the sun. Tom saw more than stone. He saw magic. He read books about rocks. He watched videos online. He even dreamed about them. In his dreams, rocks flew. Some sang. Some told stories. One Saturday morning, Tom held a map in his hands. His eyes were bright. He pointed to a tall mountain. It was far from home, but Tom was sure. He smiled and said, "Maybe we can find a blue one." His parents looked at each other. Then they nodded. They packed water. They wore strong boots. And together they began to climb. On the mountain, Tom stops. He sees something in the dirt. He digs. Just then, Tom saw something bright in the dirt. It was red. It looked like fire. His eyes lit up. He gently picked it up with both hands. The rock was smooth and warm from the sun. It shone like a tiny flame in his palm. Tom held it high and showed his parents. His dad leaned in and looked close. He nodded slowly, eyes full of surprise. It looked like iron, dark red and heavy. His mom touched the rock and smiled. She could see how happy Tom was. They both knew it was special to him. Carefully, Tom placed the rock in his backpack. Then, without a word, he hugged his mom. He hugged his dad too. His heart was full. He felt seen. He felt loved. They didn't need to say much. But his parents looked at him and smiled. They knew one thing for sure. Tom didn't just see stones. He saw stories. He saw beauty. The mountain became their weekend place. Every Saturday, Tom woke up early. He packed his bag. He wore his boots. His parents got used to it. They filled water bottles. They made sandwiches. They smiled at each other. Tom led the way. He knew the trail. He walked with care, always looking down. Tom's backpack was always full. Not with toys, not with snacks, but with rocks. Heavy, quiet, beautiful rocks. He gave each one a name. Some were soft gray. Some were sharp and shiny. Some sparkled in the sun. He kept a notebook. He wrote notes beside each rock's name. Silver tooth, found near tree stump. Blue drop, shaped like water. The family found a small empty hut near the hill. It was old but strong. The roof did not leak. The door still closed tight. Tom looked inside and smiled. This will be their home, he thought. Not his home. Their home. The rock's home. He cleaned the hut with his mom and dad. They made shelves from old wood. They laid the rocks in rows. They added small tags with names and places. It was quiet. It was simple. It was perfect. The hut was now more than a hut. It was a museum. Tom's museum. But he did not call it mine. He called it the Stone House. To him, it felt like a small world. A world made of time, touch, and tiny treasures. One evening, Tom sat in front of the hut. The sun was going down. The sky turned soft pink and gold. He looked at the shelves inside. So many rocks, so many names, so many stories. But something felt missing. The rocks were quiet. The hut was quiet. Too quiet. That night at dinner, Tom looked up. "I want to show the rocks to other kids," he said. His parents stopped and listened. "Maybe they will like them too," he added. His mum smiled gently. His dad nodded. The next day they made a sign. The Stone House, a tiny rock museum. Open Saturdays. Free for all. They also printed small flyers. Tom drew pictures of his favorite stones. They put the papers on shop doors and trees. On Saturday morning, Tom stood at the hut's door. His hands were shaking. His heart was beating fast. "Will anyone come?" he whispered. Then he heard soft footsteps. A small girl walked up the hill. Her name was Lily. Behind her came 2 more kids, then a few more, then parents, then neighbors. Tom smiled. He welcomed them all. He stood by each shelf and told the stories. "This is Blue Drop. It looks like water. This one is Fireball. I found it after a big rain." The kids listened. Some asked questions. Some took notes. Some just stared in wonder. Tom's eyes shone. That night he wrote in his notebook, "Today, the rocks made new friends. Maybe dreams are like rocks. We carry them, then we share them." He closed the book with a quiet smile. The stone house was full of life. Every Saturday more people came. They laughed, they listened, they took photos with the rocks. Tom felt proud. He wore a small name tag, Tom, Rock Keeper. He cleaned the shelves every week. He added new stones. He made new labels with neat handwriting. Tom was happy, very happy. But one day the sky turned dark. It rained hard. The wind was strong. The trees shook. That night Tom could not sleep. He kept thinking of the hut. In the morning he ran up the hill. The trail was muddy. The wind was cold. When he reached the stone house, he stopped. The door was open. The roof was broken. Rainwater had come in. Shelves had fallen. Stones were on the floor. Some labels were wet and torn. Tom stepped inside. He picked up a rock. Its corner was chipped. His hands shook. His eyes filled with tears. He sat on the floor, his bag beside him, his dreams in pieces. His parents came quietly. They stood at the door. They didn't speak. They just sat beside him. Tom did not cry out loud, but his heart felt heavy. He looked at the broken shelves. He looked at the muddy ground. "It's all gone," he thought. "All my work, all my rocks, all my dreams." They stayed there until the sun went down. Then they walked home slowly. Tom said nothing. His hands were in his pockets. That night he did not write in his notebook. He just looked at the blank page. Days passed. The hut stayed broken. Tom stayed quiet. He still walked to the mountain, but now he walked slowly. He picked up no rocks. He said no words. One morning a knock came at the door. It was Lily, the first girl who came to the museum. She held something in her hands. It was a rock. It was red, like fire. Tom looked at it. He remembered the first one he found. Lily said, "I found this near the river. I thought of you." She smiled. Tom took the rock. He smiled too, just a little. Later that day, more knocks came. One by one, the kids came back. Each one brought a stone, some big, some small, some shiny, some rough. They all said the same thing. "We want to help you rebuild." The next Saturday, something beautiful happened. Parents came with tools. Kids came with brushes and cloths. Neighbors brought wood and paint. They worked together. They fixed the roof. They built new shelves. Tom's mom brought warm tea. Tom's dad played music from his phone. Everyone laughed. Tom stood in the center of the hut. He looked around. New shelves, new lights, new smiles. But the same love, the same heart. He picked up Lily's red rock. He placed it on the first shelf. He made a new label, Hope Stone, gift from a friend. That evening Tom wrote in his notebook, "Sometimes things break, but people can help. Dreams can fall, but they can rise again. And when we share them, they grow stronger.